Welcome to the Communicating Earth podcast by Climate Acceptance Studios, the podcast by and for climate and nature communicators. So our guest this week, I first found out about him during his performance on the Outrage and Optimism podcast. And the thing I took away from that was that there was a dollar amount against how much it would cost to convert the whole human race to the cause. I'm very interested to see if there's any update on the 2023 figures. I went on to actually have the good fortune to interview him at the We Mean Business 10th anniversary gala in 24 in New York. So pleased he's here today. He's the founder and CEO of Potential Energy Coalition. It's a non-partisan, non-profit marketing firm whose mission is to dramatically increase public support for action on climate change. After 30 years as a marketing leader and spurred on by his son, he switched careers to bring the science of marketing to climate communications. And it's safe to say he's one of, if not the most influential person working on climate messaging in the States today. Through his research, he has concluded that the best way to reach people is through messages of love. John, welcome.
It's great to be here, Tom. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to our conversation.
Very good. So firstly, is there an updated figure for how much it's going to cost in marketing spend to convert the entire human race to the cause?
We have a very analytical firm because we come from a marketing and an analytical heritage. So we are constantly looking at how much does it actually cost to get somebody to be a strong supporter of action on climate change. The number is going down, believe it or not, since the 2023 podcast. And I think there is a network effect. So if you get enough people and then they start talking about it and they carry the message forward, it could go down a lot. And so I still believe, despite the fact that it feels like there have been some setbacks from a political point of view, I still believe that this is affordable and this is something that is probably one of the wisest investments we should make. We've been doing this for about 5 years and we've seen the cost go down by about 60% over the course of the first few years. And I think it will continue to go down because our stories are good ones and we just need to tell them well.
Very good, very good. And also because there's more wildfires, there's more floods, there's more evidence and controversial evidence, I think. Is that a factor, do you think?
It's a big factor. I mean, there's a lot of conversation and a lot of hypothesis about how to connect with people on the issue. But the thing we find over and over again, and this relates to your opening comment about love, the thing we find over and over again, if you connect the actual consequences to things that people actually care about, you move people significantly. And sadly, the consequences are on the rise, but it does mean that our opportunities to connect the dots for people are also on the rise, and we need to take advantage of those. And that means extreme weather. That means, worries about our kids maybe not having the lifestyle that we wish for them. But it also means things like skyrocketing insurance rates and increasing costs and affordability crisis. And all of those things are kind of landing at the kitchen table these days, much more than they were 5 or 10 years ago. And 5 or 10 years from now, they'll be landing at the kitchen table even more. So we're, in marketing, we have this RTB, reasons to believe, and then your key messages, and those reasons to believe are growing. And so our marketing is getting more successful every year that goes by, which is sadly is correlated to the fact that the phenomenon is getting harder. But we're optimistic that we actually can get a significantly greater number of people demanding action, and we have lots of evidence to suggest that that's the case.
So we're working with a British academic called Chris DeMay. He did a TED Talk last year, and his work and yours very much crosses over. And indeed, our mission statement at Climate Acceptance Studios is very much based around his principles, which are that it's stories of action themselves that inspire action.
Mm-hmm.
Does that chime with you, do you think, and your research?
I think it does. I think any great marketing needs two things. It needs a reason to care, and then it needs a call to action. Those are the words that we use in the marketing parlance from my prior career before I became a climate marketer. And so both of those are essential. And both of those we haven't had enough of. And so I think we focus a tremendous amount about what is it about that individual, that it varies depending on what segment you're in. But, we've done, I don't know, probably 5,000 hours of focus groups listening to people from all walks of life. And so we focus a huge amount on what will get them to care and then what's the call to action? What can we get them to do about it? And so both of those things need to happen together, and both of those have been, I think, have been under communicated over the last couple of decades, and so we're trying to put some energy into both of those.
How do you identify yourself?
Oh, well, we talk about the firm. It's a nonprofit, but we talk about it as the marketing firm for planet Earth. We have a, it's a, I spent 30 years in, doing marketing for big companies like, Walmart and Bank of America and, those kind of companies. And then my kid made me do this. And so, but it's the same stuff. It's like, but the product is just a little bit more important to sell than soap and shampoo. So we think of ourselves as climate marketers. We're not necessarily an advocacy org or an activist org. We're really trying to use the discipline of how do you really understand your target market, all those things like segmentation and message testing and so forth, and bring all those analytics and those tools into how to sell this particular product, which is a solution for climate change and the energy transition.
So the audience for this podcast, I think, is primarily communications professionals that work within the international NGO and not-for-profit sector.
Yeah.
So and I think maybe sometimes there's a reluctance to use a word like brand or marketing because it's associated with neoliberalism and the evils of capitalism and
That's
blah,
right.
blah, blah.
Right.
But
Making you
I
buy more stuff.
personally, so I have a very similar career path to you, right? I come from the private sector and I went into this space in 2019. I used to be in consulting. I mean, what would you say to those people who resist the concept of marketing and the concept of brand within their work if they are, say, running 100 water salination projects around the world or something?
Yeah. Well, I think any discipline can be used for harm or for good. I think at its best, I like to think that marketing can have some nobility to it, because at its best, you're really deeply trying to understand other people and understand what makes them tick and relate to them and connect with them. And so I think that those principles, which are principles of deep listening and really, really thinking hard about not what you believe, not what your message is, not what you're advocating for, not what you're passionate about, but what matters in their lives. And I think that's a little bit of the difference between a marketing toolkit and an advocacy toolkit. We don't come into this uh, challenge from the point of view of having a point of view we want to make you believe. We come in of it saying we need to understand your life so that we can make this issue relevant to you, and that is a sort of flipping it on its head a little bit. And it's hard to do because you do have your own values and you do have your own beliefs, and our team has those, and our team feels certain things and has certain passions. But we really try to take what I think is the best part of marketing, which is the research and the insights and the empathy side, and sort of deeply understand, like, what does it take a rural conservative to care about this issue, and why might they care about it? And I think that forces us to have some reflection on maybe doing things differently and not necessarily talking to each other. So that's good. That's kind of the noblest side of marketing. Certainly, I used it to sell a lot of product in my day, but I think this is it's about getting people to care. And there's certainly something to care about, and we don't care quite enough right now. And so that's the discipline we're trying to deploy.
That's really interesting because I think the current state is that you've got the 89% project. There's
Yeah,
lots of evidence around the world that like people know there's a problem, right? And the climate deniers are getting more and more isolated and shrill. And
yeah,
indeed, their messaging has pivoted now to it's too expensive, we can't afford it, as opposed to
yeah,
it's not happening.
yeah, yeah,
And so the awareness is there, but maybe not necessarily the action is following. And so maybe that's because they've been advocated to, but they haven't been empathized with, as you said, within your
yeah.
marketing strategy. Do you agree with that? Do you think that's true?
I do, and I think there's a difference between soft support and hard support. I mean, certainly, here's the positive thing. We tested a suite of, I think, 14 different policies globally. Things like you need to put a price on pollution, or you need to, promote clean energy or electrified transportation. You think about all the things that we actually need. And on average, for those policies, there's 5 supporters for every 1 opponent. And so the support is there. The problem is we operate uh, in an environment where there are also messages on, that are slowing things down. And so the question is, how strong is the support, and does it hold up? And so that the most effective message to slow things down is this is expensive, which it doesn't happen to be the case, and this is hard, which also doesn't happen to be the case, but that happens to be an effective message. So in a competitive context, we actually really need to show up against those messages. And so that's how we get durable support is having things be more relevant, because people move around a lot on both sides.
So the principle is action inspires action for this podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested in specifically you, John, in your career, or indeed
Yeah.
something that you've worked on. Is there a specific tale of action that you can share with us, a case study, if you will?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. I think, and I have some rays of hope here. I mean, I know it's been not the best couple of years in terms of feeling like we're making a lot of progress on the issue and that backlash may be on the rise, but my data says otherwise. My data says we're on the move right now, and it just may not feel that way. So I have two stories. The way I've been thinking about this is sort of how do you get what we're trying to do is get more educate citizens so that they support the actions we need. And so we work in two ways. We work upstream, as in we're not necessarily talking about climate and clean energy, particular policies, but we're actually trying to get people to care broadly about the issue. So upstream means backing into culture, thinking about you know how you how you engage people in the things they care about. And then we work downstream, like in a particular state, how do you educate people so that they're supportive of the things you actually need, whether it's electrifying transportation or being able to build more clean energy. So upstream into culture and downstream into action, both of those we're seeing really significant progress. And so if I pick the upstream one as an example first, so we run a program where we create a whole bunch of educational content. And we have hundreds and hundreds of creators with tens of millions of followers who we help to do that as well. So we're thinking about surrounding people in their lives, whether they're consuming media or whether they're on TikTok. So creating climate content that basically moves
Mhm.
people. A lot of that is digital and social. And we're significantly increasing people's so, people's understanding of and support for action on climate by inserting the conversation into things that are much more cultural. So what does that mean? Yes, it's about your kids and their future, but it's about your skyrocketing insurance rates, or about preparing your home for extreme weather. All of those things that are regular, everyday kitchen table conversations. Having climate enter those um, has caused a 25% growth in the size of the segment who strongly supports immediate action for those people exposed to that content. And so moving upstream into culture and having people talk about it on Kelly Clarkson and different podcasts and those kinds of things really does engage and move people a lot. And so that's a super promising direction on the upstream side. Maybe my favorite story on this was that we had the privilege of putting an ad on the Super Bowl the year before last, and I was super afraid of this because oh no, it's going to be so polarizing. I'm going to get hate mail. This is not good, because the general perception is this is really polarized, and you got the haters and the deniers and the believers, and so we were like, let's do it. And so we have this really good story about a mom and her kids, and they're growing up and thinking about the issue and how it actually affects their lives, and the advantage of doing this is that the advantage of doing all this marketing stuff is ridiculously measurable. And so when we looked at the measurement, we grew conservatives more than progressives, and we had 14 positive social sentiment to every one negative social sentiment. So my hate mail didn't arrive on this thing, and it was 14-1. And so, and the most dominant comment on social media was, "More, please. I feel less alone." And so I think part of the secret here is we need more communication. So if people feel like there are others who are talking about it and thinking about it, that it's in the cultural zeitgeist. And so
Absolutely.
you insert it on the big stage, America's big stage, and you get a positive result. That was awesome for us. On the downstream side, so I'm giving you two stories. Like, we run a whole bunch of campaigns in states to educate citizens in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania and California. And there's a lot of progress being made at the state level. So while we, I can give you a couple more specific examples if it's helpful, but while we're afraid that, maybe we're losing traction at the federal level, um, places like Michigan and California and others are continuing to move forward. Texas has the highest growth rate in clean energy in the country right now. And, 21% of their power comes from renewable or comes from wind. And so it's, when you get local and when you get in states and you look at what's actually happening, there's a whole bunch of stories of action with leaders saying, I want to do this because it's beneficial for me and it's beneficial for my citizens. And that's happening in lots of different places. So we haven't lost optimism on the downstream side as well, actually getting, things to happen in communities and in states.
So I want to rewind a bit and I want to go back into like the technicalities of the project itself, because I'm hoping that, this is a thing that can be adopted, probably not at Super Bowl ad level, but on a smaller scale. So when you're going around like approaching them and booking that slot, do they care? Is it just the highest bidder? Was there any resistance there? I mean, what was the process of actually, getting that ad? And I'll put a link in the show notes so I know it well, actually onto that slot to be shown. Was there any resistance along the way? Was there any bureaucracy? Did you face any sort of climate deniers who tried to stop you and so on?
We didn't. Um, we and it was. I thought we might, but I do. I think that it was not seen as a political thing, and I think that's very important for us. We have this phrase, it's not political, that we try and insert in any conversation we have because it just disarms people. Because people, if you think about climate change as a brand, you can think about it two ways. One, it's an overheating planet that has a dire set of consequences on our lives and our livelihoods. Or second, it's a progressive agenda trying to accomplish a certain set of goals, right? And so
Mm.
if and brands pop into our heads when we say phrases, right? So if I say Coke, a wave and a red color and maybe a polar bear will pop into your head. So climate as a brand has a couple of associations. We've just been very careful to try and evoke associations of the phenomenon of an overheating planet, as opposed to the suite of policies that tend to belong to a political party. And there's just a whole bunch of words and imagery and tiny little things that make it feel like the overheating planet thing, and we don't get too climatey on this stuff. So I think one of the reasons that we were able to not have any political pushback on broadcasting our message is that it feels very human. It feels like it's a story about motherhood. It's not a story about an environmental and political agenda. And all of our spokespeople are very thoughtful, and we try and make sure that we have the equal number of conservatives and progressives. They're very thoughtful about saying this is not a political thing. This is the
Mm.
thing that I care about as a farmer, I care about as a mother, I care about as a homeowner. And we probably don't use the word climate as much. Now, I still don't, I'm not a person who thinks you should steer away from talking about climate change. Absolutely, you should talk about it. But, talking about the consequences, I would say a consequence within 5 words of saying climate change. So you're making it not feel like a political agenda. You're making it feel like a physical phenomenon that's happening. Nail a consequence down, pin it to the phrase, and have people think about its actual implications, so that it's not a political conversation. And when you do that, you get a lot of acceptance, and it's not nearly as polarizing as people think.
Yeah, can you give me some specific examples of that? Because I remember seeing that before. I think this is such a key point.
Oh, how to make it feel less political?
Yeah, like actually placing, within 5 words, the word
Yeah.
climate within the.
Oh, the climate change that's making our farms less productive and raising our
Mm.
food prices, or the climate change that's increasing our number of expensive storms by 20-fold over the last 20 years, or uh, climate change that's skyrocketing our home insurance rates because of rising extreme weather risk. All of those tangible consequences. Not the climate change that's raising the temperatures by 1.5 degrees.
Yes.
Um, I think I said I have a blog called Cozy Not Catastrophe, where because the average person thinks the UN's target is 4 degrees, and it just doesn't seem that warm, 1.5 degrees. And so it's taking it out of the decarbonization and the 1.5 degrees, and just honestly consequence messaging, health consequence messaging, economic consequence messaging, affordability consequence messaging. That stuff really works ridiculously well, because that's what people are thinking about.
Such an important point. I'm really interested in actually the sort of the technicalities of your role. So, you talk about like a 25% uplift. What are you as a firm actually doing to get that stat? Are you surveying people? I mean, what's the actual process that you go
Yeah.
through?
We have, I think maybe because of our heritage, we've come at this with sort of an absurd amount of analytics. And so we have done, we've served and measured probably 4 billion ad units over the course of since we started a few years ago. And we do large in-scale surveys to not just to see how people's attitudes are changing, but also to measure how their behaviors are changing. So in one of our longer running campaigns, we did 23 large scale uh, surveys of the same cohort of people. So 5 million people observing how their attitudes and behaviors are changing over the course of 5 years to see what kind of messages, what amount of spend, what media that we were using actually moved them, and that includes influencers and creators. It's, some paid advertising, PR opportunities, getting on podcasts, all those kinds of things. So we measure the dosage that people are getting in their lives, and then we'll see how their attitudes and behaviors are changing, and then we can derive what it costs to for this to be a top priority, or for people to join a group, or for somebody to talk about it at their school, or to talk about it with their friends, or make it you know change their behavior. So all of the longitudinal tracking enables us to see what the economics of all those are, and that's pretty valuable because then we can tell we can tell people, if you're going to go around a campaign, this is what you can expect. We have the underpinnings of the analytics behind it. In a similar way that when I sold cell phones, I would know how many cell phones I would get if I had an X amount of marketing budget.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a constant struggle that how do we measure the impact? So, an NGO is out there and they're doing good in the world, but beyond like how many social media hits you have when you release a video or a
Yeah,
post about it, I think they quite find it quite hard to track that.
yeah.
So, when you're judging opinions, like, I mean, can you recommend? Are there any specific like online platforms that are quite cost effective that you can recommend that NGOs could use to track it?
Oh,
Just sort of
to
technically.
you're right, to track opinion changes and those kinds of
Yeah,
things. We've created our own testing mechanism uh, with a proprietary panel that we created, but there are other tools out there. I think a number of people are using Swayable as one
swayable.
tool,
Okay.
that where you can do randomized control testing, which basically means I'm exposing a population to a message and I'm not exposing another population, and I'm deriving the effectiveness of the message by looking at the difference between the two. So that, yeah, there are public available tools for that. We're running it at enough scale that we're able to create our own tools, and that creates a decent cost advantage for us because we're like, every week we'll have another piece of content in testing or another pulse that we're looking at.
Very good. Swearable. Fantastic. Because often, the people who listen to this, my clients, they're often, they're having to go back to their funders to prove the
Yeah.
efficacy of their actions, right? And I know that sometimes they struggle to do that. So that's really good insight.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
and if people want
Uh,
to drop me a note, then I can connect them with our research team, who probably have a long list of tools that are available, and so we certainly put that in the show notes, and our team is happy to answer any questions folks have.
Very good. Because there are all these people out there and they're taking these amazing actions in the world, but they're not necessarily like effectively, A, telling the world about what they're doing, and then
Yeah,
B, measuring the impact of
yeah,
the way in which they tell the world what they're doing.
yeah. I have some good news for everybody though. I mean, there's a lot of amazing organizations that are operating maybe with slightly less scale. Um, and measurement is decently expensive, and so, but the good news is it all works. Like, I mean, some stuff works better than others, but I mean, if I had one learning, it's like anything we do works. And so, like, the biggest challenge is we don't have enough distribution. Now some messages are better than others, like we talk about, love being a great message, and materiality being important, and don't be too lectury, and don't use weird terms like scope 3 and decarbonization. So that's all some good learning. All that stuff's on our website. There's some tips there, but it all works. And so, like, do not fear if you're communicating on climate, whether it's working or not. I can guarantee you that if you were using one of these measurement tools, you would get an increase, because people just don't hear about it enough.
Yeah, I just think everybody should be absolutely absorbing your work. It's so important. We did a survey actually of our clients and beyond, and we asked them to rate themselves and how effective they think they are at communicating what they're doing, and they gave themselves on average a 6 out of 10. So I'm hoping that we
Yeah.
can help up that figure. Okay, so we now have our quick fire round. Although I think I've renamed it our medium fire round
Okay.
because it often leads to longer answers. So please don't feel obliged just to give a short answer. But yeah,
Fire away.
so I mean, firstly, this is very relevant, super relevant for your work. What's the first word for you that comes to mind when I say climate?
Well, the first word is hard work. But that's not what you're asking about. This is This is much harder than selling credit cards, but much more valuable. I think. I mean, I think consequences comes to mind. I mean, I've tried to train myself to take it out of a concept and move it into, move it into reality. So any consequence that's relevant to the audience is what I think about. Certainly, extreme weather. There's I mean, a lot of people have different theories about what the main territory should be. If I take a look at, say, 1,400 pieces of content that we've tested, and I take the top decile, so just take the 140 best ones, they're all about the consequences, and most of them are about extreme weather. And so, like, don't shy away from the phenomenon itself, and how it's actually doing things. It's just the quickest get. A lot of the things that are, some people think, oh, we got to talk about economic competitiveness and so forth. As I said, it all works. But the more conceptual you get, the further you get away from somebody's daily lives, the more work you put them through, the more cognitive it is, the less effective it will be. So the simple stuff is the best stuff.
Very good. Uh, who is your greatest inspiration in climate comms, personally?
Uh, well, I mean, we have we have three values of potential energy: courage, caring, and curiosity. The curiosity one's super big because we have a lot of data and we need to take care of each other because it's our job. But I think courage is a super important one. I think, uh, and so, the people who came early are the ones that, and it's really easy to say, oh, well, Al Gore got it wrong or it was too technical. But thank God for the people who came early on this because they had the
Mm.
courage to speak up and see the issue. And so I would say that's really important. And I think, there's some awesome, I don't know if you haven't her on your podcast, but Diana Elizabeth Johnson does an amazing job. And there's some great, there's some great communicators these days that are making a big difference.
Is there a favorite book or a movie or a TV show that you can recommend the audience that they might not have heard of
Well,
that's associated with this?
yeah, I mean, I'm a consequence person. And so this one's a bit of a downer, but it's a great book. The Sixth Extinction by Elizabeth Colbert, which is, really actually really realize what's happening to the planet that we inhabit. And it's just an outstanding
Mm.
book. And I have found that the things that make the consequences vivid do get people's attention, and they do. What is marketing? Marketing is about relevance, right? And so I I uh, I think that book really has sort of talks about what's happening on the planet that we live in, and so that's very interesting. And it's just important to discuss the peril. I hate to say it. I don't subscribe to the idea that we have to stop. We got to stop talking about the problem. We should only talk about the solution. People move when you talk about the problem. And so
Mm.
that's a book that I think is a really, really profound, profound set of learnings.
What's your favorite communications channel?
Oh, channel. Well, we're storytellers. I don't love the fact that the world has gone into 4-second chunks. I hopefully that'll change. And so, like, we certainly do a huge volume of stuff in the quick and cheap and fast media, the TikToks and the YouTube Shorts and so forth. But a great story well told requires some poetry and requires some beauty and it requires some time. And so the longer the better. And I think that's the challenge for communicators is catching and capturing people's attention. It's interesting. We've done studies on length of a piece of communication, and persuasiveness. And it's nonlinear. If you can keep someone's attention for a while, you really move them a lot, and you move them for more duration. You have less.
Mm.
So I mean, yeah, we do all the good, cheap, blips of all the things that you need to hit someone with a message and get through the scroll. But a great story, a great video is really important. I will also say that authentic messengers are are the whole ball game, and so getting farmers and doctors and nurses and so forth to talk about the issue in their terms in a way that's entirely authentic is by far the most effective way to do this.
And that's a great counter to the prevalence of AI slop, right? Until they make deep fake massively scalable.
Yeah.
I so agree. What's your favorite stat or fact?
My favorite stat or fact. Well, um, I'll give you a couple. I think that um, from our global study, I think it was 89% of citizens across 23 countries said government should do what it takes to solve this problem, and so like the public is with us on this. Um, but on the other hand, uh, I think it's about 20% of people think that solar has gotten cheaper, and it's gone down by 90% in the last 10 years. So on
Yeah.
the other hand, one is a source of optimism and one is the value of education. There's still a massive amount of education that needs to be done. The cool thing is when you educate people, you move them massively. And so I don't mind the stat that says not that many people know that clean energy has got significantly cheaper, because that gives us an opportunity, and we're still doing great. And so it gives us an opportunity to message more.
Do you think that's the one climate myth that you wish you could eradicate, or is there another one?
Oh, a
What's that
climate
one
myth?
piece of misinformation, disinformation out there you wish could just be eradicated immediately?
Um, Yeah, I think that it's too expensive and it's too hard is probably the one I that's most important to eradicate. We we've played into that a little bit, I think, with some of our communications. Sometimes it feels like a luxury item rather than a mass item, and sometimes we talk about the massive transformation required. And sometimes we say we need to ban X, Y, and Z, and all of those things connote a priciness to it, like something that's really big, something that needs to be eliminated, uh, connotes something that's hard or something that's scarce. And so I think we need to really attack the um, the fear of it being too expensive with the truth that the darn stuff is free. The sun and the wind are
I
free once you
know.
build the infrastructure. And so I love the word free. I love abundance. I love the idea that there's enough power in the sun to power in 10 seconds to power the whole world. We have an ad that we made on that. And so that idea, when we go head to head on the affordability argument, we win. We definitely win. We just are not showing up on the affordability argument nearly enough.
And that's definitely what they've pivoted to, isn't it? The fossil fuel PR, that's definitely been a strategy
Yeah.
of theirs that they've pivoted to this over the last couple of years. Now that they've lost
Yeah.
the "it's not happening" argument.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, aside from your own data, what is your number one source of climate information?
My good friend Tony Lazarowitz is a constant source of both data and deep, deep, deep insight at the Yale Center for Climate Communications, and they just have so much amazing stuff cooking every week. There's a new idea, and it's more than the climate maps. There's so much going on at Yale, so that's a go-to source for all of us at Potential Energy.
Very good, very good. And finally, is there? I mean, it's so relevant to you. This question: do you have like one go-to an analogy or metaphor for explaining the climate crisis that you'd like to share?
Well, we've used the pollution blanket, and first of all, the term pollution is underused. It's interesting, climate has a solvability problem, right? Like the percentage of people who care about it is really high, but then when you ask people, do you think we can solve it? It drops precipitously. But if you just reframe it and just say, do you think we can solve our pollution problem? You gain 20 points. And so pollution feels much more solvable than global climate change or global warming. Um, and it's something that people understand, and it's something that feels much less political. But the idea that there's a blanket of pollution that is surrounding the Earth and heating us up is a metaphor that's worked really well. So we always use that when we're describing the phenomenon. And if you say a blanket of pollution caused by burning fossil fuels is overheating the planet, you make all the progress you need, and you don't even have to evoke any political associations.
Mm, mm. We're all in bed at various points, aren't we? So going back to being directly relevant to your own life rather than some
Right.
abstract concept like
Exactly.
decarbonisation.
Yeah.
um, okay, let's return back to your like tales of action.
Hmm.
Um, Now, normally this takes ages, right? Because we talk a lot about how do you measure impact more generally, but that's your raison d'etre, right? Is to measure impact. But I mean, what other is there anything at the back end of those projects, the upstream and downstream projects, that surprised you, or what learnings could you take from that you could share with the audience that could make
Yeah.
their lives as communicators better?
Well, I think um, the amount that people will move when exposed to a climate message is substantial, and that we have seen through dozens of different studies, and so that continues to give us a lot of confidence. And I think the extent of it has been pretty surprising. Um, but it's true. It's true both ways, right? And so this is why we need more climate communicators out there. Let's say you are humming along and you want to make some progress on electric vehicles. 52% of America support a suite of policies like on electric vehicles, like charging infrastructure and subsidies and those kinds of things. And I think it's probably around 30 who don't support it, and then you've got a bunch in the middle. That 52 can go down to the low 30s in the presence of an opposition message, or it can go up to the high 60s in the presence of one of our messages. And so you got 30% of people who aren't thinking about this very much, are worried about issues in their day-to-day lives, get concerned when somebody says they're going to take your car away, or it's going to cost you too much, or you're going to, whatever those issues are, but get excited when they think they can get a better product, and then everyone deserves the ability to, be able to have a clean car and have that be an awesome vehicle. And so it's a contest, right? You got like 30% up for
Yeah.
grabs on this. And so I think what we've learned is that's awesome, because we know how to move those people and we know how to educate those people so that it becomes more relevant to their lives. But we've also learned that we have to show up, because if we don't show up, then we don't move it forward. And so it's just kind of essential that we do more climate comms right now. And I think um, we have learned that we can move everybody. Okay, people who are radical believers of disinformation become strong climate supporters when exposed to the right kind of a message, and so that gives us optimism. But it's also a little intimidating because we don't have the channels up right now to get 8 billion people, active on the issue. So we need a lot more spokespeople, and we need this to feel culturally more mainstream to talk about the issue. But that happens with social issues, and so I'm not that worried. I think it'll just take a little bit of time.
So we need volume, we need more spokespeople. I mean,
Yeah.
overall, how do you see the future of climate comms?
I mean, I feel good about it because um, when we get our messages out, they move people a lot. I think there is a temporary period of climate hushing going on right now, and I view it as temporary because the consequences are big enough that it will come back into the conversation. If I worry about one thing, it's like we overreact to the fact that climate's not made a lot of policy progress in the last year and a half, and think, oh, maybe we shouldn't talk about the issue. It's not the case. The data is clear that if we talk about the issue, we move it significantly. So I think
Mm.
it's just a matter of staying in the game, um, keeping focused on what the data tells us, not getting distracted by a fad or something that people feel or talk about at conferences or feel like it's in vogue, being truly empirically driven and keeping at it, because pendulums swing back and forth, and we need to take advantage of the fact that there's I guess I might say there's some potential energy in this particular pendulum right now, because it's swung pretty far to one side. But, you know, political folks and business folks have shied away from the message a bunch in the last couple of years. Your regular citizen hasn't changed a bit, not a bit. And so it may be less than, media mentions have gone down, but your average person still cares. They're just not hearing
Mm.
about it enough. So we got to get back in the game.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that business and institutions are green hushing?
Um, I think that the worry stack has gone up a lot, with wars and with, affordability issues and so forth. And there's a perception that can climate find its way into the worry stack right now because there's so many other things that, you know, global instability and that kind of stuff up there. I would assert that in 2012, the number 13 election issue in the US was immigration. And so things move from place to
Mm.
place. And I would say that there are a lot of aspects of climate change that fit right into people's worry stacks right now. Like, are my kids going to have a better life? Am I going to be able to afford my bills? What do I do about, the dramatic increase in energy costs? And so making climate relevant to what's in people's worries right now, as opposed to is important. And I think there's been a misperception that you can't do that, and our data says that you can.
My next question is so ridiculous when addressed to you, which is to what extent do you follow and apply the science of communication? So, in which case, I'm going to pivot to what extent do you think that the science of climate communication is generally being applied within the sector, just as a punter or within your professional work?
Yeah. I think a lot more than it has been, and there's a lot of new orgs that are cropping up that are applying, empirical methods, and then a lot of new tools that have arisen that make that more cost effective. I mean, you can do a focus group with a synthetic customer right now overnight with AI. And so what's happened is, I mean, marketing is just an absurd playground of data right now. And that as that data gets more available to more organizations, people are using it and applying it. So we are making progress. I think um, if I think our organization has tried to be like ridiculously empirically driven about things and tried to have the
Mhm.
courage to say, well, this works better than that. But I see lots of organizations doing that, and I think a lot of the philanthropic community is very rigorous in terms of how it thinks about applying data to the problem. So I think we're making good progress.
Very good, very good. So, like the funders, do you think are now applying data,
I do.
applying
Oh
sort of?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
There's
really
a lot.
interesting.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a lot of there's a lot of new energy in the philanthropic community that comes from a quantitative and a business background that values the values the rigor that made them the money, and so and comms applies that, right. That's what great communications does. There's an empirical, scientifically driven discipline, and it's an art, and you
Well,
can make beautiful things. So forget about that.
what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Success happens just not on the not on the linear path that you're looking for, but just keeping at it, and you can find an accidental success if you just keep at it. And that's our hope with this issue. It's hard. We're grinding away. But what I always tell our team is, the Margaret Mead quote: "Don't ever doubt that a small group of citizens could change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has." We always talk about
Yeah.
that as a company, and I think yeah, if you just keep at it, some small organizations have massive impact and ripple effects, and you don't necessarily know how they're going to happen. So keep working hard.
You mentioned as well we need more and more climate communicators
Yeah,
entering the sector. So, as they're joining, what would be the one piece of advice you would give them?
I would say, um, be humble. Uh, that the answer may not be what you expect, and it's 80% listening and trying to and look for signals, and don't follow fads. Because that tends to be human nature to hear something at a conference and then say that thing at a conference and everyone's talking about it at a conference. But like, you know, be a listener.
That's really interesting because I have heard humility a lot as an answer to that question amongst previous guests.
Yeah,
Maybe there is the attitude that we're saving the world, and there maybe is an element of I don't know, like a
yeah.
complex in there or something. Uh, I mean, we've covered this already, maybe, but let's just formalize it into a question, which is, what do you think is the most important message that the public needs to hear right now? Is it the cost message again?
It's interesting. We just completed a very major study in the G7 looking at what are the most resonant climate messages. And what came out again was the protect what you love message was the leading message from that study. And an overheating planet is threatening the things that you love, particularly your kids, but also the places you love, the land you love, the country you love. And so that that closely followed by a bunch of other consequence messages like health and rising costs and so forth. And so the consequence messages did the best again. And I like the love message because it's not like hope versus fear. It's something deeper than that. Love is both. Yeah, it's about identifying what people deeply care about. I think in a political sense, the cost message matters a great amount because that's where the dialogue is, in economies throughout the world right now. So plugging climate and clean energy into that conversation is essential. But climate in
Mm.
and of itself is still a powerful message and still needs to be spoken about through leaders throughout society.
Fantastic. Final question, and we end with a thought experiment. Listening to this podcast right now is every single climate and nature communicator of the world. They're all listening, and you've got the opportunity to say to them, what is the one strategy? What is the one thing that they should be focusing in on their work right now? What would that one thing be?
Um, well, it's a great question. We've covered a lot of ground. Um, I think that there is a need to grow the size of this movement. And so the one thing is to deeply ask yourself about the next 20% of people who we need to walk through walls on this issue. Who are they and what do they care about? As much as the 30% or 40% of people that we already have. For those people, it tends to be less of an environmental cause and more of a impact my life. We talk about the need from a move from morality to materiality, away from sort of the shoulds and the musts and the shan'ts and the bans and the mandates to the you and your life and what you need. And so I think that's the trigger to fight back on on opponent arguments saying this is too hard and too expensive, but actually no, it actually is beneficial. But it's like landing it with the next 20% and not getting stuck with people like us. Like we spend a lot of time with people like us, who care a lot about it, but
Yes.
really thinking about others.
Really thinking about others. Very good. What a great ending. So, what's next on your to-do list? Thank you so much for your time. What's next up in your diary as a busy climate communications professional, John?
Oh boy. Um, we've got so much stuff going on right now. We're very focused on immediacy and using technology to stay in the conversation. And technology is opening up a massive amount of opportunities for us to learn immediately and to deploy immediately and to sense immediately. So a big focus for potential energy is on the technology side, and how do we actually use technology to be persistently in a conversation, especially when a moment happens, like an extreme weather event hits or insurance rates go up or whatever. Actually using technology to own those moments and to own those moments in a way that feels non-political and feels relevant to people.
Wonderful. John, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Great to do this. Thanks, Tom. Really enjoyed it. Good questions.